For an appraisal of yesterday's debate, I'm now joined by political analyst Dr. Ongama Mtimka. Dr. Mtimka, appreciate your time this morning. Let's pick off the conversation with Sylvia Lucas' statement, "It's not the end of the world." In some ways, we have to disagree with that, because how many businesses have been shut down, closed altogether because of issues around load shedding? How many people have lost their jobs?
Usually the emperor fiddles while Rome burns. And I think that's what that statement underscores. It's not because there are so many other things that are still working as per the ruling. I think even if it was a slip of the tongue, it underscores how they feel we should have even more ability to endure what's happening in the country, and it's wrong.
Now, there are countless individuals across the country that are going through multiple struggles as we speak. Just how unempathetic, if that is the right word, is a statement such as that? I mean, what does that say about the ANC?
Well, first of all, I think it's a helpless defense. It's a helpless statement to say. When somebody has been trying to do this, that, and the other, and they realize that they don't have the competencies to deal with the issues, they switch to the victim to say, you must find a way to cope with it. And I think that even though it's not official government response, it underscores how sometimes the political elites are not alive to the realities of South Africans.
Now, in light of the contrasting narratives presented by the ANC and opposition parties alike regarding Tintswalo's representation of South Africa's democratic achievements, how do you interpret the effectiveness of using personal anecdotes as political symbols in the context of the upcoming election, and certainly the election campaigns themselves?
Look, I have a bias on that because I myself I've been a marketer before what I do. So personas, as those things are called, are very effective. Except that in a democracy, your political messages are contested, and I don't think that when the political message is being contested, it suggests that a persona should not have been used. No, it's a democracy. Our conceptions of what's happened since '94 or in the last 5 years is contested, and that's fine. That's what happens in a democracy. The Tintswalo of the State of the Nation address is not less real. It can be precisely the same person as the Tintswalo of John Steenhuisen. That's the complex reality of living in a real world. So the issue then becomes, among these competing narratives of how our life has been in the democratic period, what necessitates further urgency for change? And I think that it's the South African society can identify with the Tintswalo of President Cyril Ramaphosa and the Tintswalo of John Steenhuisen. And what is going to reflect in their choices when they vote this year is going to be that contradiction. That's why you are not having a groundswell of support that's shifting towards the opposition in South Africa, but you have one that is mixed because the results of the democratic period have been mixed. That's why the ANC is losing power only but gradually and not in huge numbers, because on one level, voters that never used to live in formal houses, who now live in formal houses, are happy, except that now their issues are different. Whereas at previous times, it would have been the risk of being drowned by floods. And now they have been moved to formal dwellings where the risk of flood has been dealt with. And they focus now on the reality of being hungry and not being able to afford the very same services that have been introduced by living in a formal housing. This is the point that I'm making, that our reality, we are not going to resolve by debate what otherwise is a complex reality.
So let's talk about the ANC chief chief whip, who criticised the opposition for allegedly seeking to preserve privilege and wealth at the expense of the majority. Now, how effective do you believe such rhetoric is in shaping public opinion and mobilising support, particularly among voters who may feel marginalised or disenchanted with the way things are at the moment?
What political communicators do is to try and get a lot of mileage from political events. So, and grand narratives help in that regard. So one behavior will easily be interpreted to be about the broader, resistance. So yesterday, for example, there was nothing about the input that the DA was making, which to me suggested resistance to transformation. But a political opponent is not going to miss an opportunity to decampaign a DA politician on the basis of a grander narrative about the position of that party on in transformation in general. The same way that the Umkhonto weSizwe is going to take, for example, things like the energy transition, not in good faith, but as an attempt to cower to the interests of global capital and imperialist states. So that's what people do. For opponents in the political stage, the misinterpretation of what one is about is always made so that the main decampaigning message is driven.
Now, Cooperative Governance Minister Thembeka Dimeng's statement, "Come with your moon pact and we will shoot it," underscores to a very large extent the confrontational nature of political discourse in South Africa. How do you assess the role of this rhetoric in shaping inter-party dynamics? I mean, by and large, there isn't going to be an absolute majority either way, so the parties are going to have to work together in structures of coalition.
Yeah, that's interesting. By the way, that's part of an interesting aspect of our body politic that we are now grappling with, especially since 2016, where you find that fierce opponents employ this language, which sometimes can be seen to be alienating or pushing the driving wedges between these parties when the language should be a lot more cooperative. But it happens. But what I've seen since 2016 is that South African parties have been able to be fiercest opponents 1 week, and the next week they are negotiating coalitions. So I don't think that the intensity of the debate and the language that is used precludes potential formation of collaborative relationships, whether it's a cooperative opposition or coalition formation.
Well, let's shift our focus to International Relations Minister Naledi Pandor, who asserted that Dintswala will vote ANC in 2024. What factors do you believe will ultimately influence Dintswala's and other voters' decisions in the upcoming elections? I mean, this narrative is largely about relatability, and you speak to certain progress that the ANC government has made in the last 30 years, but there are those that have been born into certain situations that can't relate to the progress. How are they likely to relate to the Dintswala analogy?
Granted, the ANC has pushed an agenda mainly for a rules-based international order, and in recent weeks has been a champion of what it sees as a just cause, especially as far as liberation politics is concerned at an international stage. And the challenge, though, is that when voters vote, ultimately their decisions are based on local issues. And I think that the voter is confused in this sense that, one, you're quite right, younger voters are not quite alive to what apartheid was like. They do not really identify with the brutality of apartheid, or in fact what life was like before the massive electrification that was done. They were born in rural areas where there was electricity mostly, or in townships where there was connections to all these basic services, whether it's water and electricity, refuse collection, in housing and other things. So for them, they take those things for granted. Now, this is the theory that as new generations of voters come in, the likelihood to change a political party that somebody may have voted for in the previous election becomes higher. This is why, if you look at either the history of the Arab Spring or the history of democratization throughout history, you find that it has been educated elites who have advanced in a particular period and have changed from being the uneducated to being educated, who then place demands on the political system to become a lot more democratic, a lot more accountable, and who become the driving force for changes in election outcomes. And I think that that's what's going to happen in this election, that the younger voters increasingly are going to explore voting for other political parties.
And that's where we'll leave it. Dr. Ongama Mtimka, political analyst, and packing yesterday's SONA debate.